Hey everyone, this is Ben.
And Josh.
And Jack. We roll Havoc, and this is Favored.
Favored.
Character creation in Dungeons and Dragons and most tabletop RPGs is actually very simple. You start by picking a species or race, and you pick a class. I think like the combination of classes was one of my favorite things to explore when getting into Dungeons and Dragons, and it's always one of my favorite things to look at through any rule system, see how they split all of these different types of fantasy archetypes into separate classes and different rule sets. What do you guys like playing most? I know everyone has like a particular style they like to go towards. Some people have specific classes they like playing. What do you guys like to play? Like, what's your favorite out of the whole roster?
So when I play, I kind of go to two extremes, barbarians or wizards, because
if you know Ben, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, yep.
with barbarians, it's you don't have to think too much. You run in and hit stuff hard is your whole thing, and you get to be really tough. And it's a fun way to play D&D is to play like the guy who just charges at everything.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, did you have like what was the edition where you found out that was what I want to do?
Yeah, so I was playing third edition, and I think we already had a fighter in the party, and I'm like, I'm gonna make a half orc barbarian. I vaguely had an idea of wanting to be like a wannabe conqueror type, which didn't really come up in the campaign. But it was interesting. Instead of being the tank, I was the first one out all the time, and the strategy was just to kill something before it killed me. Like it compared to fighters, I had more hit points, lower armor class, and more damage. So it was just
that was rule 0 in playing World of Warcraft is reduce the mob's hit points to 0 before your hit points are reduced to 0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that came shortly after Don't Stand in the Fire, which is the real rule.
Yeah, Don't Stand in the Fire.
It's rule 0, real -1.
Yeah.
We're just gonna keep
that. But it was like that's the best way to play the class. With fighter, it's like, okay, do I stand here and guard one of the backline characters? Do I go up and challenge? There's still like some strategy. With the barbarian, it's like, no, always charge, try to kill it really fast.
In third edition, well, they've always had like higher hit dice. They've always had higher hit dice because they're unarmored, but they're hardy, right? That's the thing about barbarians. They have high hit dice, low AC, they're supposed to be. And in third edition, I mean, they kind of start out as this semi glass cannon melee class, right? Where it's like they exhaust themselves using their rage ability to do damage, and you're just hoping that you're not going to get hit too hard to get knocked out because you're out there and you're exposed. It's like the Hulk says, it's like, I'm a nerve, I'm out there, I'm exposed. So that's the whole point of being a barbarian, is you're this kind of melee glass cannon, whereas opposed to everyone's used to like wizards of the glass cannons, like they blow shit up, but like you get a hold of them, they're done. It's like, no, but the barbarians, you're up front and you're just out there, and you're supposed to just be putting damage out until you just hope that you can get it out fast enough before your rage runs out and all of a sudden you're exposed.
It's like it's exhilarating.
But man, fifth edition really kind of fixed that, though. They're not the glass cannons anymore. They're supposed to do exactly as we've all described, run in and hit it, but they do not expect to die or drop like at all. I think it's kind of interesting that they went that route, right? Like the thing
also, I mean, you really have to get to higher levels to really unlock all. I mean, actually, and you played like the triple decker of hard to kill me.
Mm-hmm. Well, like bear totem, when you're raging, you get resistance to all damage.
Yeah,
all of it. Everything is half to you. So like, oh, did it hit? Well, at least you only take half from it. And that's level 2, 3. Level 1, something like 3. That. For
level 3 when you get your subclass for that.
You know me, I love some barbarian, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously, Josh loves him some barbarian. We had a lot of fun experience with the barbarians. You said, but Ben, you also said the other extreme that you like the swing to is
So I played an high elf wizard. So from a half orc barbarian to high elf wizard, like
that's a switch.
Extremes. Yeah,
that's a switch.
So is one of my online names that I still use sometimes, Eodrid. Thought it had a cool Lord of the Rings sounding vibe to it for
the EO
wizard, and I really just wanted to show the other players I was with, like just playing a straight up wizard. like what you can do with all the different utility spells. And because obviously you can deal out some damage, and I've played with some like newer players who would just pick all the high damage spells, and I'm like, Wall of Ice can save your ass. Like, I blocked a bunch of trolls with Wall of Ice and gave us time to run away one time. Like, stuff like that. There's
You can't beat the utility of a wizard. Whenever you look at your spell book, you actually look through what the different spells that a wizard can do, everything they get access to. You can't. There's nothing else stands up to that utility. There really isn't.
Right. And I am like, clerics have gotten and druids have gotten a lot better over the years, but also I started on like the basic D&D box set where you had 7 classes, and I would, because I couldn't play that much, I would just create tons of characters, and there's only so much you can do with a basic fighter. You roll their stats, pick their main weapon, and you're done. With a wizard, you get to pick your spells. And I had an issue of Dragon that detailed like, here's how you can like customize spells, like change their appearance and change, it gave you like guidelines for like just common sense, like if it seems by changing one element you've made it more powerful, just knock it back on another element, and gave lots of examples. And I'm like, this is so cool. Like
that is really cool.
You could come up with like a fire wizard or an elf who uses all plant-based stuff or something like so that's always been in the back of my head of like if you really want to play to customize, and this is before feats or subclasses or anything like that. If you wanted to customize your character, wizard was really the only class that you could even do that. With any other class, it was like all your abilities are the same. If you're a cleric or a druid, you get all the same spells, but wizards, you have to learn your spells. So
that's really cool.
It's just stuck with me that I hear a lot of people in 5th edition say that wizard is one of the most boring classes, and I'm like, it hurts.
It does.
I mean, in 3.5, they knew like everything you're saying. Like a wizard can fix every single situation. That's why they made them so fragile. That's why they gave them the least amount of spell choices, and that they had to actually go out and find spells to record into their spell book in order to expand that outside. Because if we gave them the options that the divine casters get, like from what they could pick from, it's like every combat would not be a combat. Every problem would not be a problem. It'd just be a party walking through dungeons, stealing gold.
Yeah, they're always supposed to be like the better spellcasters, because your clerics are like some buffs and some like religious based miracle things and healing, and the wizards are supposed to be able to do the cool stuff. And I love 5th edition clerics and druids. They can do some really cool stuff, and so I'm not against that, but wizards were always supposed to be like the I can in theory could do anything, but you don't give them the ability to do everything right off the bat. They have to learn how to do it, which gives you customization built into it. That's just not like any other class.
Well, even in 3.5, it was so in 3.5, there was a prestige class called the Lore Master, where they were a caster, an arcane caster class. Their whole purpose was to be able to decipher knowledge and to be able to extrapolate knowledge from virtually anything and anywhere they go. And they always had just this wide range of really cool spells that they were supposed to be able to cast to do that. And so that was always really neat. One thing that I liked about what we do with wizards when we played the Theros campaign, I played Aramedes, and that is I will say the only wizard I have ever played, the only like directly caster wizard I have ever played. And one thing we talked about when I was talking to Ben, and I said, like, it's really neat how the entire character customization is in the spell book. You have everyone else gets to pick what subclass they are, and that determines their flavor. And I was like, you get to pick a school as a wizard, and that does sort of determine your flavor, but it doesn't define the character like it does having, like an Oath of Devotion paladin or any of the other subclasses for like a battle master fighter or anything like that. It doesn't define it nearly like that, because once you get into like being a wizard, we can actually do everything that any wizard can do pretty well. It's just this one thing we're really fucking good at. So that's always really cool. And one thing that we did in that campaign, we had this conversation about, if a wizard comes across a spell from any class, there's a chance they might be able to figure out how to do it. So we talked about like druid spells that we would come across, and you're just like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense that Aramedes might be able to pick that up and be able to use it. And I like that leniency that you have with wizards, where it's just like, no, like wizards know magic. That's their whole thing. They know magic. Why would we put them in a situation to where like all of these other creatures and characters can cast all of this different type of magic and the wizards don't know how that works?
Yeah, and you don't want to like necessarily like take away like healing from clerics in general, stuff like that. But yeah, like wizards are supposed to be able to like pick up on just about anything. And I liked how in older editions of D&D, like it was, if you defeated an enemy spellcaster, you immediately search for their spell book, so you could see if you could learn any of their spells. And I wanted a feeling like that. I didn't want to bog it down too much, so basically I would just, in between adventures, pick a bunch of spells that were like themed off what the adventure was. Like, okay, you fought like, a snake cult that was following Farika, the goddess of like poisons and fertility magic. So I just picked like a bunch of plant-based or ability enhancing spells.
Yeah.
And like here you can choose to learn any of these within like the standard like rules for learning spells. So was able to, in addition to your like 2 spells per level or whatever that you automatically learned, just give you more options for stuff you could learn.
It makes so much sense now that I'm thinking about it, because so sorcerers are given some type of arcane power and they blast things with it. Use most of the time, you control people's minds, whatever. It's based off of whatever gave them that gift. Usually you can tell. But if you look at the whole of D&D, the idea is that you have cosmology. The divine casters are granted their power from some divine source, right? So that divine source was created when that cosmology was created, right? What that wizard is doing is, without anybody's gifts, without anybody's guidance, I am taking the rudimentary elements of reality and creating spells with it. Things outside of the god's control are my purview. So yes, of course, there's spells. I can do those. Why? Because if they can do them, I can figure out how that works.
Because I got it figured out. It's like I can see, I can read the matrix at this point.
You're seeing the source code.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
Yes. Yeah. And I still think of it as like creatures who can like naturally cast magic, like dragons or fey creatures. They do it because it's a part of who they are. Like I am living fire. I control fire around me. I talk to the wind and it does things for me.
Speaks back.
And then some human scratches stuff on the ground and mumbles some words and like jury rigs the same effect by like slightly breaking the universe. Like that just has to drive other creatures. Like on one hand, that's impressive. On the other hand, you're like gonna break something.
I feel like that explains like maybe elves and like how they're just constantly condescending. They're like, oh, these humans, like it took us thousands of years of like talking to the universe to figure this shit out, and these humans come in and they're just like, they're spunky, they can cast magic now.
Well, humans are also like, yeah, well, you guys, like, that's your lifetime. You got to learn magic. Like we got 30 years until my knees hurt. I got to figure this out now.
before the itis sets in my spine. I mean, my dad's got a thing in his knee. He was 25.
Yeah.
But so that's what Ben likes to play. But what do you
Oh, well, actually, it's very similar. So I somewhere around 3rd edition 3.5, I started to pick up a liking for melee casters, and it was because of this one fighter wizard that we have. It was a homebrew 3.5 campaign that I played with some friends after high school, and I had made Jimmy the sword mage, and he was this Gestalt fighter wizard, and he was amazing. It was super fun. Unarmored, used a 2-handed greatsword, and we had found the rules for spell strikes and stuff like that. So we had made a fighter wizard. And what I really liked about the idea is getting the best of both worlds. You have everything that a fighter is supposed to be good at, that flavor of being like a swordsman, where you're so good with a weapon that it is legendary. I really liked that idea. But I also like just kind of taking things from fantasy and saying, I want that. And so like having the magical elements kind of tacked onto that, I felt made it so much better, because it was just like, it was this person who had found a way to blend martial prowess and spell casting. To be honest, I really just wanted a fighter who could cast fireball, and it was pretty great. And it ended up working out. That was a really cool campaign. That was the campaign. Yeah, it worked out really well. In that campaign, so he was a fighter wizard. We also had an archer type, like it was a fighter rogue type who specialized in archery. We had a rogue monk. This was the campaign we took, and the end boss was Orcus. Somewhere around level 10, my character died. Jimmy, Jimi, is named after Hendrix. He died. So sad. I know. But then I got to play a paladin who had power armor. That was pretty great. That was pretty fucking awesome. I could go into that later. Anyway, so this fighter wizard ends up coming back because it was the only arcane caster. He was a follower of Bacab, and Bacab had said, hey, here's a new metal body. You're go back to the material plane. We need you to handle some shit. So he comes back to the material plane. He's pretty much like a homebrew Warforged before Warforged were a thing. The end fight, the boss fight for this, we took it to level 20. The boss fight was Orcus. He invaded the material plane. And so we had the party who was able to take on Orcus, who invades the material plane. This portal opens up somewhere in some kingdom. It's this huge, massive portal. And he's dragged into the material plane on a litter held by like millions of, what are they called? Dredges. Yeah. So like millions of dretches carrying this litter with Orcus on it, who is now like, this becomes the boss fight on this litter because it's the size of a football field. And so it's this really cool thing where like rocks and shit are flying out this portal. And I have this fighter wizard who's just like trying to keep Glabrazu under control all over the place with, he has a whole bunch of different divination, abjuration magic and sword strikes. It was this really cool epic scene, and that whole campaign just gave me this really kind of liking for melee casters. And so I've always just really liked that kind of mix. Not a lot of editions do it well, where you can actually have that perfect balance between the melee side and the casting side. I feel like it's hard to find that balance.
Yeah, like if you go back to like basic D&D, that's why the elf was popular, because it was basically a mashup of the fighter and the wizard.
Yeah.
And its experience point table was ridiculous. Like you were like level 3 when everybody else was like level 7 and 9.
Yeah. So it was interesting because in second edition, the way they did that was only demi-humans could multi-class, and only elves could be fighter mages.
Mm-hmm. Humans had the dual class, which means you had to leave your class behind permanently and go do something else. Because, as you know, that's how humans work. That's how if you switch careers, like
you can never go back.
Never go back.
Wasn't it a weird thing too, where you gained new levels quicker? Because like that level still had like but I purged all the old bad experience stuff because I remember because there was this thing where it was like you gain that level faster, but you don't gain experience points from using your abilities in another class. They had this it was this whole weird thing. So it's hard to find 3.5. You couldn't really, I mean, you had the multi-class system where it was like you could gain a new character level and then put that level in another class. And it was always kind of weird to me because it's like, all right, so if you're level 8 if you're level 8 fighter and you want to take like one level in wizard, it's like you have to gain all of those experience points to hit level 9 just to get like one level in wizard. Always seemed kind of weird and off to me. But then Pathfinder had the Magus class, and that was absolutely beautiful. And I got to try that out in Savannah when we lived in Savannah, and like we played with Josh.
Yeah, my own experience with the Magus class was in a brief Pathfinder game I was in, where the guy hadn't actually read the class, so he had to reference the rule book every round when his turn came up.
Oh my god, that's rough. We had that was really fun because Josh was the DM. And it was fun though. It was good. So I played a dwarf magus. There's a Skirnir subclass that someone had drawn up, and it was just pretty much made it more defensible. So I was like, oh, it's like they're pretty much like a magus with a shield. I was like, yes, a dwarf with a dwarf was going to do this. This is what we do. And Josh was great because he let me use the spell strike and a spell storing axe at the same time. So it would be the situation where it's like, all right, I'm going to cast Shocking Grasp, but I'm going to cast it through my axe, which is then going to trigger this other spell that is, I think it was like 8d4 of piercing damage, because it was these like teeth that came out and like hit the target.
You were that guy.
I was that guy.
You were the guy we don't have to worry about. And like, because that guy could take care of himself.
I did that.
And the rest of the class was like, these
well,
people
we were playing with people who weren't very experienced at the time, so it was just like, it made sense for me, like, I'll just be impossible to kill, but also be like doing all the damage. That was it was great playing that dwarf though, because I remember charging through like a wooden hut to like get to the other side, because it's just straight through, wall to wall, just like, all right, I need to intercept a creature that's about to kill the person on the other side, so I'm just going to charge through this wall right here.
Hey, you very much like Daniel Craig, James Bond did that.
It was
situation.
Great. It was pretty great. But I think honestly, in general, all that did was it gave me kind of a taste for melee casters. And I just really like melee casters in general. And so I think that's where, even in the Eberron campaign that came up with Bakram was a paladin, and they did a great job in 5th edition of making paladins this very balanced, heavily armored melee caster. And it was very similar. It really is just like, it was a radiant damage flavor to that idea, where it's, I want to hit something and occasionally I want to throw magic damage on top of it. And it's like, oh, look, smite. And it's like, but then later on, I get the utility of paladin spells, where it's like, I get to heal, I get to cast like freedom of movement, depending on your subclass. You get different utility for it. So I would love to say that like, oh, like the fighter wizard is like my favorite class of all time, but I've had the most fun, I think, in my games playing melee casters. Someone who is heavily armored up at the front, who is also able to just like call in a little something else that isn't just a weapon to take down their enemies. I always felt like that was a really, really neat idea. My honorable mention, though, is definitely going to be Light Domain Cleric in 5th edition, because holy fuck, Baron von Berger in our Forgotten Realm, our Forgotten Realm campaign, the pet NPC is a Light Domain Cleric. And I love just being able to control him as an NPC. He's super fun. It's like, do you want heals or do you want fireballs?
He's a laser cleric.
It's great. Cleric. He's also his whole bio in Roll20 is just lawful good, don't mean lawful nice. It's just like, I'm here for it. But I think I already know the answer to this. But hey, Josh, what's your favorite class?
I'm gonna read an excerpt for you here really quick for both of you. Okay.
By all means, the floor is yours.
When you go, your footprints will fill with grass. Moss shall cover your tombstone, and as the sun rises, green shall spread over all. This verdigris will overtake your swords and your coins and your battlements, and try as you might, all you Hodir will succumb to it. Obviously, both of you guys know it's Druid.
Yeah.
Right? And
yes,
I picked, that was the first class I ever played in D&D. I picked it simply because they got an animal companion and they were all about the natural world. My entire life up until age 18 was basically constantly getting in arguments and being made fun of for a person who thought that deforestation wasn't a good idea, that all the trappings of the modern life that you have are not great for everything. I was a junior zookeeper. I rehabilitated injured animals. Druid was what I thought was like, oh my God, in a fantasy game, I can truly be myself. But it was only once I started playing did I love the class, because I realized that class can be anything you want it to be. It is the most malleable of all the classes, and not just in how you build it, as in literally within the same combat can take up different roles required of it if something goes bad. It is your best backup plan is to have a druid in your class. They have an animal companion so that they can deal damage and take a mob off of you. They can summon other monsters to take more mobs off of you. They can start healing their allies that are hurt. They can be the tank once the tank goes down. They can do absolutely everything that any other class can do, almost as good as that class can do it.
You know, it's funny as you say that, because like that's what a lot of people said about Bard in like 3rd edition. It's like the perfect 5th party member is a Bard, because it's like they can fill in any role that you need.
They are an addition. See, they are good to have. A druid is one of those things of like, you survived because of type of thing. At least that's how I've always seen it. I have played, I counted it up before this podcast, 11 different druids. All of them built differently.
It's a lot of druids.
Okay. Through the different versions of D&D and Pathfinder, through different versions of other role-playing games that it wasn't even technically a druid. For the Middle Earth campaign, where I said I made a druid out of classes that weren't actually a druid, I made a druid there too.
He's a druid.
He's a druid. I make druids because I love the natural world. I love animals, and I love showing the power of what that really is, because it's not something that you definitely get within your normal day, right?
Yeah, I also know you though. You're an optimizer.
Oh, of course.
So I want to know, all right, yeah, you love nature. You love nature and all this stuff, but what is it about the druid that you're like, I want to play that? Well, okay, you're like, so I see the mechanics, you see the inner workings of that class, and I want to know like what is it that like draws you to
and I will say Josh is a person you want playing the druid, because they're a really complicated class, and he'll learn how to use all the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean,
for sure. Yeah, definitely. If he doesn't already know how to use them, yeah.
They have 2 party like in 3.5 is where I learned. 5th edition version of druid, they kind of forced you in the fact of like, oh, this is whatever you want it to be. Like, you could do, originally it was like Circle of the Moon, right? And Circle of
the Land.
The Land. So it's like either you turn into a bear or you cast spells. You know, that's really how it comes down to. And they had like additional hit points. But I started playing in 3.5. So my version is the 3.5 druid, which is you had to earn your shape shifting over the course of leveling up, right? You could only go into animals that were, their hit die were equal to your hit die or something like that, or challenge rating.
Yeah.
And so you were limited in what you could do, but you're like the optimizer. The rogue is really good at sneaking. You know what the rogue isn't? A rat. The rogue has to roll to get through that dungeon. The rogue has to roll to find those problems. The druid doesn't have to do that. The druid just turns into a rat and walks in there. It's like, is there a problem here? Well, the druid is an eagle, and they flew away. It's not a problem to them, right? The druid, when your party is TPK'd by that dragon's breath weapon, the druid is the one that flies off so he can come back, collect all your thumbs, and reincarnate you back into your full party that you were before again.
I feel like you've collected some thumbs in your story. I need to hear about these thumbs. Like, when did you?
No. That's not me. That's not me. That example is actually directly from Wizards of the Coast themselves.
Okay.
It was about the story of original Dragonborn had to undergo a transformation into a Dragonborn, saying that you were falling. So the idea was it was a dwarf that took the undertaking to become it. Then he convinced his party to go attack this dragon that was well outside of their challenge rating, and it killed everybody except for the druid. The druid came back, took his thumb, reincarnated him. He turned back into a dwarf when he brought him back. Actually, not a dragonborn. And the whole idea was about the dwarf having to struggle. It's like, do I want to undertake it again? Because I knew exactly how stupid it was. So that wasn't my story. That was just a story that really hit me.
That makes sense. That does make sense. I get that. Yeah.
But that's all you need is a little body part of it, and they can reincarnate you back from anything. Also, during that first run as a druid, I did die and was reincarnated. And that was the best part about it. It's like, didn't matter what race I came back as. Didn't change anything at all about what I was doing whatsoever. I was still exactly who I was, because it was just such a small part about what they can do. Also, who doesn't want to turn to a bear, guys?
Yeah.
Just want to turn to a bear.
My perception of druids completely changed when I started playing World of Warcraft.
3rd edition. So I played World of Warcraft after 3rd. I rolled druid because of my love for druids in 3rd edition.
Okay.
And in vanilla WoW, druids were absolute garbage at all of those things. Vanilla WoW before they did Burning Crusades and stuff like that. So I played a feral druid because of my love for my D&D characters, and everybody who like when I finally got into a guild because friends were actually good at playing and I was still not good, they had one thing called Innervate, right? That only they had. And basically they brought me along in dungeons and stuff like that because I could innervate people and get their mana back.
Yeah.
I had no value whatsoever.
As a person who played a mage, I loved druids for that.
Exactly.
Shit. I was like, gimme.
I loved druids from D&D so much that I basically slammed my head against the wall until they came out with Burning Crusade with World of Warcraft because of my love for druids. Like, no, I want to be good because they are that good.
Did you make it to Wrath? They were great in Wrath.
They're great in Wrath.
Yeah,
they're great in all the other things after vanilla WoW. It was just like almost kind of like a joke for everybody I played with.
Yeah, I mean, in World of Warcraft, I never played, but I'm familiar with the basics of what a druid could do in that game. I mean, they got all that from D&D. Like, druids could always change into animals, always had healing, a little bit less than a cleric, had a mix of offensive spells like the fairy fire. They just, up the damage on that for World of Warcraft. And then
Moonfire.
I can't remember what edition that came out as like to make them to give them more of an attack option. But that was also in general, like in 4th edition, there's also when they introduced laser clerics and had more like, let's give even the healers some offensive capability, just, not on the same level as.
But I mean, that's why they should have Fireball and Scorching Ray. Yeah, let's give it to them.
Well, I mean, in Pathfinder, they depending on what you picked, you actually could get all those spells as a druid on top of shapeshifting into a cheetah, so you're 500 feet away from your enemies while fireballing them, right? But
that makes sense. I mean, that only makes sense.
The class is so good at min-maxing, okay, that Pathfinder made those that whole class that just summons a monster that they can change its abilities and stuff like that. The murder shrimp in that one session that class. Okay. So it is my sole belief that they basically made that class because if a druid focused their whole thing on buffing their animal companion would be a force to be reckoned with. Then they're not the class anymore. You're not worrying about the actual druid. He's just casting the buffs on this animal companion. The animal companion is the one that's actually doing all the damage. And so I just felt that there's so many different aspects that they explored in 3.5 that other versions afterwards kind of made even new classes to explore those things. At least
Pathfinder for sure. Yeah, Pathfinder definitely. I was looking through some of the content for Pathfinder and it's like, no, they had core classes, they had basic classes, they had just a wide range of stuff that was extra, as opposed to just like, all right, you're fighter, you're wizard, you're cleric, you're thief, it's like, but then you have like 100 flavors of all of those different things, which included, the druids and the summoner, which had that class. Yeah.
And, I do want to mention one little bit of information is that one of the first, I'd say, occurrences of pre-D&D of the druid was they were doing a old school like war game, and the only difference was that there was a druid on one side that cast fireball. That was the whole thing. It's like they had a standard war game that was standard, and they're like, but no, there was druids that cast fireball. And I'm like, when I read that the first time, I was like, well, druids can't cast fireball, obviously, guys. We know it's arcane spell.
We know it can't do that.
Ridiculous. Yeah. But that was just like, kind of like what Ben's historical focus is on, is that druids have been in the idea of a natural world caster has been around for a very, very, very long time. And the versions it's taken in D&D are just so extracted from that original narrative that you can make them whatever you want, specifically because you don't need defenders of the natural world in a campaign setting where we're not in modern day. because the forests are gigantic. They're the encompassing thing on the planet wherever you go.
To that
Why
point,
do we
though,
need defenders?
it's because we have the defenders. That's why. If I walked into like Mount Rainier National Park tomorrow and someone came up to me with a staff that was glowing and they said, "You're going to turn around or I'm going to turn you into a tree," I would be like, "Okay, hold on, dude. Hold on."
Like,
okay.
Wait, where is the tree going to be?
Yeah. oh, thank God. Please turn me into a tree.
Oh, please.
Do trees pay taxes?
I gotta know.
Yeah.
I was about to say, I don't want to pay my taxes, please.
I remember being kind of annoyed with the what I called the Captain Planet druids, or when third edition came out, like I'm gonna make my whole character about, I remember like from some play report of like fighting some hobgoblins and their attack dogs, and the druid saying, "I'm gonna make these hobgoblins pay for making me kill these dogs." And I'm like, this is your character motivation? Like,
how about you're a druid? Don't kill the dogs.
Yeah,
I
mean, it's just like
handle animal, dude.
Yeah,
handle that animal,
right? It's like I feel like you have another answer to this that you're just not exploring.
Yeah, but also just like there's like world-ending threats, and you're like, my character's. I mean, actually, I now that the more I think about it, I don't have a problem with a character whose motivation is to protect dogs. But
I feel like that's
but
fine.
like
that's
just,
a good motivator.
Yeah, like the kind of like I want to like stop people from cutting down trees, and it's like, you mean the farmers in the forest on the edge of like the vast forest that extends as far as you can see in all directions? Like, what this
right.
Again, it's a modern mindset.
That was all of those others. That was all the base settings for Dungeons and Dragons, Favor and Greyhawk. They were all like that until Eberron came out. You couldn't find a real motivation for a druid to like really like make sense that they wanted to defend something.
It was nature priest, and it was like, what is that? It's a nature priest, and people latched on their kind of like modern ideas about saving the environment onto what was historically a priest class in Ireland. There's a big disconnect there. I always thought Druid was really interesting too, because it requires so much, like you have to understand how like the monsters work. Like you have to know how the animals in the monster manual. They got into like this, especially third edition had a big problem of like they would design a new monster and make it a beast, and all of a sudden the druid is overpowered because somebody didn't take that into account.
I can definitely say that the shape shifting is one of the best parts about the whole class. Right. So there was a prestige class
for sure
called Shifter that was all about taking your wild shape and making it so that you can now wild shape into this type of creature, like with the creature type, this type to the point where you got all the way up to level 10 of that thing, and you could use your wild shape to shapeshift now an unlimited amount of times into anything you could equal to your hit die. When I was able to do that, that's when I realized that game with that character actually wasn't fun anymore. I knew too much. I knew how to fix every situation.
Broken the veil just a little too hard.
There just wasn't a monster that was a challenge, because it was like literally, it's like you play a Magic game, it's called Mental Magic, where you just have just the casting costs of your cards, and you just come up with the spell. Like that's what it was. I was like, oh, you have this? It's like, that's cool. I'm a water elemental. I was like, what is your fire gonna do? Nothing. It's like, oh, like we're underground. I was like, earth elemental, earth glide, no problems here. I think I might have mentioned before, we're fighting a Baelor. I turn into a Hydra. Good luck with that Vorpal sword. It's not doing anything. It like literally every single thing that this is supposed to be scary, it's not scary anymore, because I'm able to be anything. So it's almost as if the limitations of the classes are very necessary in order for them to be fun.
Yeah. Otherwise you get to like there's too many choices, and either you don't make a choice, it's too intimidating for new people, or the exact right choice to defeat everything, and then it's
not to mention upsetting the rest of the players in your party when you do stuff better than every single one of them can do. because there's a monster that does it better than they do.
That's on those players. They need to step their game up. I'm gonna go ahead and say that right there.
Yeah.
No,
All
that's
right.
on them. They need to figure that out.
I just remember a lot of upset people.
If the rogue cannot be as sneaky as a rat, they need to like really think their career choices through. Honestly, I'm just gonna put that out there. If you are not as swift as a raging river, you are
as force of a straight typhoon.
Yes.
The fighter's like, oh no, how are we going to get out of this? It's like, just fly away like an eagle, dude.
Be as mysterious as the moon. It's
you
all
can't
you got to
fly. I do like the Mulan reference, by the way. I'm not just trying to straight it.
I think
you can't fly.
Yeah.
I'll turn into a giant eagle instead. I'll carry you away.
And now it's a Lord of the Rings reference. Honestly,
I played a druid briefly in Pathfinder, and it was a ton of fun, especially with the in Pathfinder you could take the weather domain, and so it's like, hey, are we outside? Yes. All right, call lightning.
Call lightning is a signature spell of the druid, and it is really fun when it works.
What does call lightning do? Is it just like lightning bolts from the sky?
So you had to spend a round to cast it, and then at the beginning of the next round, every round you call a lightning bolt.
And it does a lot more damage if you're outside.
It's like 3d10 in a storm or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then those splat books had a thing called Call Lightning Storm, that it was instead a 10-minute ritual that the lightning bolts did, I think, 5d10 instead. So if a druid could plan ahead, literally it's like an army is gone, because we're talking, like AoE.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
Again, about that planning and being prepared for every situation. They had it in droves.
Druids are really good at it.
Sorry. They had it in groves.
Let's be honest. All of the classes are actually really a lot of fun to play when you dig into them. I think, especially in 5th edition, it seems like Dungeons and Dragons has done a good job of kind of balancing out the classes and making them all pretty like fun to look at and work with. And throughout all of the different editions of Dungeons and Dragons and different like tabletop RPGs, there's just so much that you can kind of dig into. There's not enough time ever in the world to play them all and check them all out. But I think I need to ask you guys real quick before we close this out. Radagast the Brown, druid or wizard? What do you think?
I mean, he's obviously a wizard because he has that, he's like from
the Brown.
He is from, but he's from.
It's a title,
right? Like,
honestly, I mean, the wizards of Middle Earth don't correspond exactly to the D&D rules.
It's unfair. It's an unfair question.
All I've seen him do is talk to animals, so he could just be a forest gnome.
He's a shitty wizard.
I would say
if he's a wizard, he's a shitty wizard.
I mean, he does what he wants.
He was given his mortal form.
Life. No, he's not.
As like a level 1 wizard, right? He got there, he looked at grass for the first time, and he's like, you know what? I'm inventing the druid class. And I'm going to level up in it. And then that was the history.
So Radagast created the druid class.
I think so.
From smoking too much grass. I like it. All right. Thank you all for listening. We're Roll Havoc. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you next time.